Hello, I'm gonna make a spirituality video because I have to fulfill a quota. I'm using quotas to keep myself disciplined about this. So, what do I want to talk about? Oh, there's a plane. All right. I don't know if you can see, but there's a flashing light in the sky over there. All right, it's gone now. That was a plane. Okay. So, that plane is consciousness. Just like everything is consciousness. I had a friend, and we were looking at water in a lake, and we saw a reflection in it, and we saw all this moss and lily pads, and we probably perceived the presence of fish and tadpoles and amoebas and algae and everything in the lake, and I said, I don't know, like, isn't this nice or whatever. I brought up some spiritual thing somehow, and then she said, I know that I manifest from the same thing that this does, the same source, or from the same place that this does. And it struck me odd. Oh no, I mean, I didn't disagree with it. It just struck me because I'm like, well, you're a person. That's water. But the truth is that all things come from consciousness. Before it proceeds, before you get into the atomic level of H2O versus and chlorophyll or whatever, and mitochondria and stuff, and atoms and so forth. Those things all exist in the larger thing of consciousness. And looking at it from a bottom up standpoint and perspective, you'll never understand it. Because it's as if a mind is thinking about some larger thing that the mind itself cannot be aware of. The truth is, though, is that the larger thing is what contains all of these things. The larger thing contains the mind, which is why, from a mental standpoint, you can never understand spirituality. You can understand some principles mentally. You can derive some wisdoms, perhaps, and you can think about some of the things that you experienced. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately all mental, right? In the same way, for example, how am I going to relate this to math? With math, okay? Let's say it's sort of like if a kindergartner is trying to understand Einstein's theories. No, a better way of putting it. Yeah, no, Einstein. Let's say they're trying to understand Einstein. They can't understand it. It is unintelligible to them. But Einstein, he can understand the kindergarten math, where 2 plus 2 equals 5, 2 times 4 equals 8, that sort of thing. Although that might be ahead of kindergarten math. But my point is, perhaps even a better analogy might be a kindergartner trying to think about algebra 2, which is like 10 years ahead of them, and Einstein thinking about algebra 2, which is like a billion levels below him. Einstein can understand it. He's looking top down. As a matter of fact, it's so trivial and insignificant to him because he sees something, a picture that's so much larger than the mere scope of algebra 2. But to a kindergartner, algebra 2 is a complete dynamic upheaval. It's a complete shift beyond anything that they know, because they know the most linear and basic thing of math, which essentially is 2 plus 2. And then, 10 minus 4 equals 8, not 8, 6. Right? Like, it's so simple. It's like, like 2 or 3 principles in kindergarten and math. Now, algebra 2 is like, 20 principles, and they all compound and sort of relate with matrices and quadrants and parabolas and hyperboles and so forth. And asymptotes, holes, finding 0, finding x, the solution, whatever. But algebra, Einstein, he's like a billion times ahead of that. If kindergarten's 3 principles, algebra is 20, Einstein is like literally, essentially like a million times that. Essentially, if not literally, because it's dimensionally so much more complex. And he understood at a mathematical and scientific level the deepest thing that had, as of yet, been discovered. And it was multidimensional. It wasn't like Edison, right? Like testing a light bulb 600 times, right? Edison did create something, but it was also something that, had he not created it, shortly thereafter, after he did not create it, someone else would have created it. Because what he did was was an advanced practicality, but it wasn't genius. What Einstein did is genius because he did not do something that if he did not live and exist, the theory of relativity or whatever the fullest depth of what he discovered is would not have existed. Right? And it had a major consequence because that thinking was applied to the bomb that ended the war in World War II. Think what you will about it, whatever one may say, that problem, that level of thing did create something that was new at a much higher level. So like the atomic bomb had like more firepower than essentially all the bombs dropped by planes, all the bullets and whatever fired through all the previous 4 years. You see, that is the importance of understanding things at the highest level. And by the way, what Einstein understood is not the highest level. It's simply the highest level that had yet been um, discovered, untapped, and brought into the world. Now, speaking of Einstein, he was a genius, literally a genius. And not just a genius in the domain in which he, thought about things, but a genius with respect to, his inquiries into human life and understanding and so forth. So my father told me a story, and I don't know if it's true, but I'll relate anyway, and we'll assume it's true. Einstein, he was this sort of disheveled, crazy scientist guy, hung out at his house all the time, and some guy called him for some meeting for something, right? They're going to meet on a bridge. Einstein shows up, and the guy shows up like 5 minutes later, 30 minutes later, something, right? And he apologizes to Einstein. He says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I wasted your time. I apologize." And Einstein said, "It's no problem. I sat and I stood here and I was thinking, and I was still furthering my life work while I was standing here. Just like," and he looked at the river underneath the bridge, "just like if I throw a stone in that river, it'll cause a ripple, but it does nothing to actually change the flow of the river. Similarly, this time that I spent waiting does nothing to actually change the flow of my thoughts." See? That's a multidimensional answer and an exceptionally wise and patient one, whereas someone else might have just been annoyed that their time was wasted and they couldn't have been at home studying more. Einstein talked about stillness. The greatest things that came to him came from stillness of the mind, which is to say, he would study, practice, whatever, learn, all that. And then it would be in moments of stillness when he's not thinking, when he's relaxing or just hanging out in the woods or doing something mundane, that the realization came to him, hit him. Maybe the theory of relativity came in that way. Now, on a further level, he said, "I want to know the mind of consciousness, or the mind of God, rather. The rest are details." See, the atoms, the plane, the specific geometry, and so forth, are necessary to make a plane run at a scientific level and at a physical level. But this entire line of thinking is not, or field of inquiry is not. It's not even a field of inquiry or a line of thinking. This whole spiritual thing is not about dissecting things at a material level or a mental level. It's about looking at it top down, looking at everything top down at the very highest level. Much like Einstein would look at algebra 2. That's essentially what Einstein sees in algebra 2 is essentially what all the universe, what all the materials and sciences and pretty much everything are with respect to consciousness, which is to say they exist, they occupy their own domain, but from a top-down perspective, you understand it all as part of consciousness, because consciousness is all. It is everything. And it's nothing. It's actually nothing, but it contains everything. So the ideas can be, again, unintelligible, and that's why direct experience internally is necessary. It's essentially, as Eckhart Tolle says, the separation of thinking and awareness. So your awareness, I was aware of the plane. That's more important from a consciousness level than the infinitude of things that transpired to make that plane fly. I'm aware of this my mirror image that I'm seeing as I'm recording this video. I'm aware of my foot. I'm aware of where I am. I'm aware of the thoughts that are occurring. And through my awareness and through your awareness, we can, and through by tapping into the awareness rather than being lost in the details, lost in the geometry, lost in the science, we can then have the awareness to, and we can then see and feel everything that's in consciousness. We can perceive things rather than think about them. And that perception is essentially the depth of our life. From a certain way of looking at it, the perception is really what matters. It's not the mental abstraction about it. So, anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back really quickly, really shortly with another one soon.